Connecting with purpose is about doing what matters most in a time when our families, workplaces, and communities need us. This show from Purpose Views presents honest conversations about what's possible when we invest in helping our people be their best, purposeful selves. You'll hear the challenges of making those investments and tips for reaping their rewards. This show is designed to help people-first leaders like you create the impact you seek. Let me introduce you to the purpose-driven and real-talking hosts, Mark, Neil, and Nell.
So hello, a huge welcome to another episode of Connecting with Purpose. I'm Nell Derek Debevoise, a partner at Purpose Fused, and thrilled to be here today with Grace Zuncic from Cotopaxi. You are the Chief People and Impact Officer, so you're like hitting all of our areas of interest, which makes total sense. I know why I'm here. But by way of intro, other than your illustrious background and a decade at the fabulous Chobani, which probably has made many of our days better already today, tell me a little bit, Grace, how do you think of your purpose and why did you accept this conversation with me today?
Yeah, I love that. Well, now it's great to see you. And thank you so much for welcoming me on the show. This is what's interesting about the question is that you should just automatically know, oh, here it is. Here's my purpose statement. I've been working on it my whole life and I figured it out and it's my elevator pitch. I think I'm lucky to have more recently discovered it because I took the time to reflect on the question, both with you asking me again, but when I went through a career transitioning from, 10 magical years at Chobani to what I was going to do next, I really spent time thinking about what brings me meaning in my life. And we're all here to find that thing because once we unlock that thing, we find our worth and we find our value as human beings. And so the statement or the thought that I've had that feels most authentically me is to serve others by making people feel valued and worthy. And if I can do that at scale, I'm the happiest. And so that ultimately, I think, led me to HR, and a sort of a longer course than I had initially expected when I was approached to run the department in my past life. But that is really the thing that fuels me. And I realized that this was likely my purpose because of two things. When it's happened, as I mentioned, I feel like I'm at my very best. It makes me feel happy and fulfilled. And the second is that when it's not happening, I'm actually accepting of it because it means that I'm finding meaning in situations that are difficult and hard because difficult situations can also fulfill your purpose. So purpose isn't, from my perspective, always perfect or easy. It just feels like what you're meant to do. And I think people that have figured it out in life are so lucky. And sometimes we have to take a little break in our lives or be very intentional in finding it. So I appreciated the question and the time to give some context around how important it is to figure it out because it can fuel so many elements of your life.
Yeah, 1,000%. So well said. And again, just so aligned with everything we think about and do. And I think a really important thing that it isn't just obvious, and you don't kind of figure it out once. You're not born knowing it. And it is so magical to go through that process. And I want to highlight what you said of taking the time to do it, right? Because all of us get busy and, Tuesday afternoon between 3 and 4:30 p.m. doesn't look that purposeful for a lot of us if you just are in the weeds there, right? Totally normal. And so I think that's really, really important and helpful probably for listeners. I know a lot of our partners and clients think about how do we either help our teams take or make that time, or how do we have the courage and the privilege to find and make that time ourselves as leaders throughout our careers. So really, really beautiful. Maybe related or maybe not. My first question as we dive in is we always like to start kind of breaking some myths. I think good news, bad news, purpose is having a heyday. Everyone's talking about it, which is cool. I think it's exciting. And I think in some ways it's very real and deep after the last few years of upheaval in all the ways. And I think sometimes it means that it can get kind of overplayed or trite or superficial. So what are some of the things you think of are kind of either don't do's or watch outs or misconceptions when it comes to people's individual purpose?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest misconception might be that you can't make purpose and this is from a business perspective, a consistent part of your employee experience because your level of attention to it is dependent on business performance. So in other words, that focusing on purpose is somehow some sort of distraction from the rest of the mission of the company. So first principles, I always think that purpose and impact should be treated like business metrics, how you're measuring them, how you're evaluating them, that you're looking at them as you look at revenue and profit and margin and IMU and all the rest. So I would treat it that way to make it a consistent practice. Secondly, and this maybe was getting at what you were speaking to now, there's this other misconception that purpose can only be found through work, or that work has some sort of requirement to deliver all the purpose that you need in life to feel whole. And I think that work is not necessarily the best source of one's purpose. It's a source in a pie of a lot of things that give people meaning in life. And that goes back to really taking the time to think about those things that bring you joy, that make you happy, that are meaningful, that may not be tied to your personal success or your ambitions, but they're tied to very, maybe very simple things in your life that bring you a lot of joy. And are you making time for them? And that was something that really hit me hard during the pandemic, where I realized that a big source of my meaning and joy was my family life. And they were being, shortchanged by my work life. So I would say that that's something. And also, I think that someone would make, work their purpose out of some sort of deep sense of loyalty and not meaning in the work alone. I think that has really shifted in the workplace in terms of how employers have to realize that the delivery of purpose in the business model is so important, because the natural loyalty to the organization is a bit faded. I think through the pandemic, through so many twists and turns in our society in terms of what the corporation and what the business should mean in someone's life, people for years had such a hard time leaving a job or making a transition because of deep sense of loyalty versus a deep sense of connection to the purpose of the company. And so that's sort of a really interesting shift that's happening, which means dialing up purpose as a business strategy is even more important.
So well put, right? That two-way loyalty of companies to us and us to them. But for sure, we have blown that up and inside out, I think, in the last few years. Really, really well stated. And I love the pie of things. We've talked a little bit about my book coming out in a few months, which talks about the 6 spheres of impact, right? And so the first distinction, which came from working with people like you, right? MBAs in school, but also well after into their professional leadership journeys, and realizing that the first distinction that emerged as, from working with these people was your job versus your workplace, right? And so even that can be different. There are a list of bulleted items that evolves of our job description that we're specifically paid to do. And maybe those have impact and we find purpose in them, but maybe not. But, there are things like employee resource groups or recruiting efforts or a green team, or, B Corps obviously have their own beekeepers and bee teams that might be these kind of extracurriculars at work that provide purpose. To say nothing of everything that's beyond. As you said, family and friends is one of my important spheres, self, but then also community and money. So totally have a lot of respect and value that kind of holistic perspective, I think, is so important for people. So appreciate you calling that out too. So again, maybe building on these misconceptions or trying to counter them, or something else. What is one thing? I know you do so much. You do such deep thinking, but if there was one thing that you could choose, I bet, what would you kind of light up or hold up or mentor our listeners about who want to create more of that individual purpose in their workplaces?
Yeah, I thought about this a lot. And, if you could point to the one thing that would make a difference, everyone would latch onto it. So I try to reflect more on my experiences of what I thought was most effective. And it's consistently connecting people to the aspects of the company or aspects of the work that are bigger than themselves. It is the thing that I have seen drive the most meaning, the most value, the most dialogue, the most conversation. The thing that pivots people from thinking about the one thing that's just driving them mad within the organization, that's actually a really small thing relative to the bigger goal that's trying to be accomplished. For me, on a personal note at Chobani, it was our hourly associates, focusing on them and their well-being each day was the effort that always felt bigger than me. And at Cotopaxi, what I'm finding, and this has been amazing because it's embedded in the business model, it's this mission to alleviate poverty and do good through the work of our foundation, to make our philanthropy very consistent and visible, to find ways to ensure that impact is integrated in the employee experience in every job description, to ensure that our sustainability work is ongoing, it never ends, it's a journey, our journey to circularity, new efforts, new initiatives, and that we are constantly looking at ways to do the least harm in our business model. That's like our everyday vibe, and that's pretty exciting. And so I think if you can come up with consistency and bringing it up and reminding people of what it actually is and how it's a part of their role and what they're doing to contribute to it. And I do believe it's more than sign up for this volunteer program and you'll be reminded, or go look in the handbook or attend this session on our values. People need to feel it in the work that they're doing in a consistent way. So that would be the one thing. And then the question is, who owns that? Is it owned by the people team? Is it owned by the impact team? Is it the executives? I've been in experiences strongly led by the people team, organized, structured, and in a new experience where the executive management team feels accountable for this goal is a really different experience. And so that is something that I think is magical about, impact-oriented business, purpose-oriented businesses, where the whole executive team is holding hands and trying to create this experience for its employees. And so I'd really encourage you to think about the ownership and the accountability of the work. And make sure that you're dispersing it effectively across the organization to have it permeate more deeply into the employee experience.
Yeah, awesome. A few follow-ups there because I think it's so juicy. What does that look like? Like, how do you distribute it across the organization really tactically?
Tactically, I would say, well, where are the roles that are most focused on the work, right? So if you look at your innovation team, your product team, your manufacturing, what are the conversations happening with your suppliers? You move it maybe further downstream. What are we, talking about from a product development perspective? What are we looking at for, new materials? What's our roadmap for sustainable materials? What are we doing in our local communities? Are we serving all the communities where we do business? What's our philanthropy strategy? Is it consistent? Is it some years? Is it other years? Is it every month? Cotopaxi contributes 1% of its product revenue to the foundation every month. It's a very consistent practice. You could look at roles within the people team. What's the recruiting experience like? Do we ask people about their commitment to impact and purpose? Do we ask them about how it fuels their, kind of career ambitions? So you think about all of those different touch points, and I'd only mentioned, a few that you could think of, but they're really everywhere across the business in one way or another in how they show up. And I think that the people team can give business leaders tools on where to go looking and how to kind of think outside of the box and get creative. But ultimately, the ownership needs to be dispersed.
Yeah.
And I think that's the magic, and that's the unlock to make the work continue and not just stay with one leader or a couple leaders and it changes and it shifts it, but rather have it be truly embedded in the business model and hard to erase.
Cool. Which I always see and hold up to people as actually an opportunity. I mean, I know it can sound a bit daunting at the start, but the opportunity that I see is linked to my other follow-up, which is, this connection that we think about a lot of organizational purpose, super powerful and important, clearly in, your past and current work, but also really holding up individual purpose as even the bigger needle mover, right? Of my connection to all of this work. And so I think by dispersing it means that everyone, right? I tell the MBA fellows we work with, like, you don't need a job in CSR anymore. It might be that innovation team that's getting asked about that. It might be in product. It might be an operation, supply chain, right? All of these things are valid because it needs to be, it is everywhere. And so it can be thought about everywhere. But just say a little more about that connection between, yes, having a clear, strong organizational purpose that trickles throughout, but then also the bottom up piece of connecting the dots for people to helping them find and discover their purpose and then make the linkage.
Yeah. Well, basic things would be in your role. You shouldn't need permission to do the right thing. And you shouldn't need permission to have a long-term strategy on how to do it better, more sustainably, more equitably, more justly, perhaps, depending on what industry you're in. And so I think that would be one thing. A lot of autonomy to do good. And we really infuse that in our business model at Cotopaxi, but it's not really seen everywhere. It's sort of like there's a one way, it's a proven way, it's the way my manager expects me to do it. And I'm not so sure that culturally I'm in a position to push up against it and say that there could be, a more sustainable way, a more ESG friendly way, however we want to talk about it. So I think that would be one aspect of it. And so that individual purpose, I think, is really important. But also, I'm going to go back now to what we were talking about how much work should define one's individual purpose, right? And we were talking about that before. We viewed it as the pie. And I think at Cotopaxi, I've learned that from our earliest days, just to give a bit of an anecdote, we had a really close-knit office environment that was family, to so many people. From a purpose perspective, it fed work needs, it fed personal needs, it fed community needs. So many aspects of that pie were filled by the workplace. And I've been trying to get my head around sort of this strategic shift and the impact on, a group of people that were so shaped by what work offered them from a purpose perspective from an office environment. And I spend a lot of time talking about remote work. I really believe in it. I mean, I wouldn't have had the chance to work for Cotopaxi if we didn't have a remote first business model. And the company made this very intentional strategic trade-off going to remote work for most of our corporate and support roles, not for our amazing retail team and distribution center team. They're on site, they're on location. But the philosophy around remote work was, how can we bring in more diverse talent? Expand our perspectives by, assessing and accessing, I should say, all these new markets that we didn't have before, being in the state of Utah, and get talent in places we never could before to build a national brand, because we have potential to be a national brand. A lot of people are interested in what Cotopaxi is doing. This impact model is unusual. They want to be a part of it. We want to build, a tribe of believers. And it's hard to do that just from one office, one location that doesn't have sort of those insights. And to be honest, remote work has done all of those things and probably more. But now we need to embrace remote work culture and what that means for us, how remote work culture plays a role in delivering purpose in the workplace, right? And maybe it's different. The way that you experience it is largely virtual, with the exception of maybe the few times a year that you get together with your team and maybe you're volunteering, or, we have every month our impact partners come in and they speak to our employees about what they're doing. We have an amazing organization, coming this month, in fact, that's working on prosthetic legs and arms and limbs in underserved communities that are so poor the families can't afford, shoes and housing. And so things like that, like we try to find ways to reconnect in a virtual environment and remind people why we're doing this work together all day, because it's not in the office environment. We have to now make it a virtual experience. So for those who are new to the company through remote work, I think it's been wonderful. For those who've had to make more of an adjustment from the startup office culture to now remote work, it's been harder. And I think that the role that work plays in defining purpose now needs to start be thinking more about this pie. And what role does the company have in ensuring that people can go experience other parts of their pie, that they're not working all the time and they're so burnt out and they have time to go run and bike and climb and hike. We have this awesome Slack. We have so many fun Slack channels because much of the business is run on Slack, called In the Wild Time. We encourage, and we have a company benefit to use 10% of your work time. It's mostly for the salaried roles, because the hourly roles are on location, to get out, explore nature, and just have it fuel you, have adventure fuel your experiences. And the pictures and the posts that we get from our employees and our hourly associates on the weekends, these amazing things that they're doing with their lives outside of work. It's just a reminder that there's more out there for us. Like work needs to fill that piece of the pie really beautifully, right? And really well. But the rest of it has to have other joys and meanings. And so we've been having some really great discussions about that, how to be really efficient with our meeting time, how to run Slack more effectively, how to make every minute count. And, we're not perfect at this, but we're very mindful of it, because we know that time is like this new currency, and joy is a new currency. We talked about, money being a fueler. Currencies comes in many forms. And that type of, joy that you can have to adventure and get out and experience like this richness of life. shouldn't be, should be accessible to everyone. And so that's something that we're really focused on, both from an employee experience and also how fans and consumers experience our brand.
So cool. So cool. Well done. So great to hear all of that. It's so exciting and really does explain the dimensionality of Cotopaxi. And, I was actually just got to be in Alaska for our summer trip. And I was
fun.
counting up the Cotopaxi items that I saw,
Oh, that means
around
a lot. That's
town
so
and on the
great.
trails and thinking about our conversation coming.
It's
but
it's very colorful.
Yes, it's hard to miss.
Out. It stands out on the trail. It's a very welcoming brand, it's very inclusive. And I think that years ago, you're not even now, you look at most outdoor brands and, they've got models and different people doing amazing things outdoors. You look at them, oh, that doesn't look like me. But Cotopaxi is very approachable, it's, and so very fitting that you saw it touring Alaska. I think that's wonderful.
No, it was great. And fascinating. I haven't really heard people cite that benefit of the remote and the hybrid. Obviously we know accessing other talent markets and people just want it and all of that, but actually, sort of seeding the brand in other markets, of course, that 100%. Makes total sense. That's so interesting.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So it's, you mentioned you're good, but always not perfect, of course, as no one is, which is a good segue to what I was going to ask next. I think on one hand, Cotopaxi is a from the roots, baked in, as we say in the conscious capitalism, B Corp world, business with purpose, clearly and unequivocally, again, from day zero even, which is a benefit. And you're all still growing and working on it and improving, right? And the world in which we're doing it is changing so fast that we have to be. Are there kind of stuck points or next horizons that you and the executive team there see as really the next layer of getting even better at activating people's purpose in the right way for your piece of the pie?
Yeah, I mean, we're hiring so many people so quickly. I mean, we're opening more retail stores. It seems like every month we're opening a retail store. Sometimes in different weeks, we've opened more than one. We've expanded our incredible, distribution center team. We've brought on a lot of new roles remotely, and we're aiming towards, giving people a shared experience. And what does that look like? In the design of our benefits, I mentioned we're always sensitive to anything that might feel that it's available to one group and not another. And if we're not offering it to another group, what are we giving them that's an equitable benefit that's kind of similar in comparison? We spend a lot of time thinking about that, and I think that's really important. So having a shared experience with a company that's scaling as much as we have, purpose is the thing that we hold on to that unifies all of us, because we're all unified towards that goal. And that's actually been very helpful from an onboarding perspective. When your welcome video is all about the impact of the company, the number of lives we've impacted since we began this journey, how many millions of, yards of fabric that we've kept outside of landfill because of the Del Dia program. We're pointing to things that give people that strong sense of connectivity. And we're very thoughtful about hiring. And they're so thoughtful about everyone that we bring onto the team, because anyone in a management position at the company of any level is going to shape the employee experience in such a significant way. And I think that's even more the case working remotely. But we work very cross-functionally. We share out a lot of information. We meet monthly as all llamas, all hands, where it's not like the executives come on, they do their presentations, and then they're gone. It's very collaborative. Ask us everything, ask us anything. We're still celebrating birthdays and anniversaries because we're a small company, but doing those things because we still can, and new hires and all the rest. And it's been, really rewarding to see us stay true to some of those original things that have been so core to our identity. A great example are life hikes, where every other Friday an employee comes on the line and they share really everything about themselves in a private setting. It's not recorded. Our employees are very vulnerable with one another about challenges and difficulties that they've had in their life that they've overcome and how it's made them who they are. And it makes us all feel really human in this place that we're working in and what we're trying to build together. So we need all the things, as I mentioned before, working together and working harmoniously and really creating, consistency in that experience. And with that intention there, I'm seeing a lot of great examples of that happening, which is encouraging.
Yeah. And what about the fast growth? I mean, obviously that is hard, right? Moving fast and being intentional in some ways are diametrically opposed, right? Obviously there's ways to do them, but sometimes there are just trade-offs. How any kind of learnings or challenges about navigating that purposefully?
Yeah, we've had to make our onboarding program totally virtual. Some of it has to be self-directed. We don't have the resources to sit down with every single employee, but we can offer them a really awesome virtual onboarding experience. And we spent a lot of time thinking about what would that look like? What would that feel like? What would we want it to look like if we were joining the company for the first time? What's reasonable to be virtual and what can we aim to do in person? What we have different summits that are climbed over the first, 30, 60, 90, 6 months of employment. And those reaching those summits are milestones in your experience and your learning with us. We keep a 24/7 pulse on the organization where people can come to us with really anything from why didn't we take out the trash in the office last week to, what's our plan for growth mapping and career planning. And I think that level of communication and trust that we have with the management between management and employees has really served us well. We have a culture of radical candor, Kim Scott's kind of challenge directly, care personally. That's been very embedded in how we work with one another. And when people don't see it, they call it out where they expect it. And that has also served us well. And there's been so much written about what you do in the early days shapes the culture forever. And I do think that's true, but then it's on the backs of the next incoming, managers and leaders and new executive team members to cherish those things and to scale them. And that's been a really interesting challenge to have. We have all of these things going back to the magic of the early days and that little office in Utah, which is still open. And I love to go and visit all the things that happened there and the decisions that were made. And those little things build and build. You plant the seed and they build and build and build, and new management comes in. And how do we scale them? How do we grow the forest of trees with these core principles at heart? So that has been great. I think that we hire people that come into the organization not to bring everything that they know and force it on the company, but to bring everything that they know and be innovative enough to take that knowledge and that experience and shape it in a way that's best for Cotopaxi. And that's been awesome to see with, some of our earlier leaders working with newer leaders that, have different experiences, different ways of solving problems, different things that they've seen, and us working together as a team and really listening to one another. So that another really encouraging thing that we're intentional about, we spend a lot of time focused on.
Yeah, super cool. I think I want to call out too, because obviously we'd love kind of holding up companies like Cotopaxi who are just front edge, right, of impact and thoughtfulness and depth around that. And I think it can be intimidating to our other listeners sometimes who don't work at a company that has that so deeply baked in. So what I'm hearing that I would call out is kind of, the radical candor, the collaboration, that humility and kind of growth mindset that people have, which can exist anywhere, right? Regardless of how many, yards of fabric you're keeping out of landfills or your donations to philanthropy. If companies aren't quite there yet, you can still have that kind of robust sense of collaboration and feedback and honesty, as well as then just, you called it human a few times, like anniversaries and birthdays. And obviously, that can get harder. I think with technology, it's actually pretty scalable. But those things matter, right? Because we are people and we all did have a birthday, and it's validating to hear it celebrated or sung or, whatever virtual cupcake might get generated or something. And I think, that too is a thing that any company can do, again, no matter how far advanced you are on your more technical impact journey. And then the final kind of bucket or category that I was hearing is just the lifestyle, right? And the well-being. I mean, Accenture of all people, right, published a report about caring to do better, and really just going back to that kind of, somewhat outdated, but I think still pretty valid and fundamental Maslow's hierarchy of like, do people have time to be healthy and sleep and take care of their kids and eat enough, and working up that hierarchy to make sure that work isn't actively taking away from some of that pie or that well-being. So is that, do you think that's all fair, that those three areas are things that any leader can do at a company or on a department?
Yeah, I mean, at the team level, for sure. I mean, scaling celebrations at a, little over 300 person company. I mean, we can do those things. I couldn't have imagined doing those things necessarily, although in some ways we did back at the old company. But I think scaling things that are simple, being mindful of the hierarchy of needs, ensuring that people have time and energy to unlock meaning in other aspects of their life that's outside of work, and asking them if they're doing that, not assuming that they're making time for that. I think people work more hours and put more in than maybe some managers realize, right? And I think that is critical. And also asking yourself, what is the last time you asked your organization, your direct manager, what if? When was the last time you really pushed for innovation? Unless it's sort of a part of you're on the innovation team. But I think that, we've gotten sort of this like rut of work, responding to Slack, responding to email, pushing projects forward, meeting deadlines. Then comes the email about the budget. You got to do the budget. And then what's your hiring plan? You fill out the hiring plan form. And we've become sort of programmatic in the workplace, like whatever's going to be asked of me, get it by the deadline. Not all roles. But I think that just being in an environment, and encouraging an environment where you can still be innovative, right? And especially when working remotely, where, some of it does feel even more transactional now because of how we're working on different systems and things, but really challenge yourself to do that. And at Cotopaxi, we would say, do it in a way that enables us to do more good. That's core to our philosophy. Maybe at another organization, it's to unlock market share. It's to do some other sort of, business endeavor. But I think that really pushing for more innovation, because doing that type of work can give people a lot of meaning and purpose, right? Unlocking something new, taking on challenges, and so I would encourage that as well. If you don't feel like that's been happening for you in the last, 6 to 12 months where you're at.
Cool. Really great tip. I love that. Well, so much more we could do, but I will respect our editor's preferences and times, and close, Grace, with kind of the full circle of where we began, which is really specifically hotspot back to you. And so, we open with your purpose. As you, look forward very far down the road after a long and successful career doing all kinds of things, how do you think of legacy? What matters to you that you will have left behind in your work and life, the whole pie?
Yeah. Oh, this is like what's on the tombstone, or maybe on some other part of your life. Well, I did write something down because I found this question to be really like, I'm reflecting on the end of life. So this is what I felt strongly about, but she did the best she could always. She left an impact wherever she landed, and it was because of how she made people feel. That is really what I would love to be remembered for. And it could be in my home life, it could be in my work life, my community life, all those elements of the pie that we've been talking about today. But that is the most important thing to me. Relationships are important to me. Doing the best I can is important to me. I feel like every day I wake up and give 100%, and I don't really want that to change. And so that would be my answer to that question.
Beautiful. So great. I know I don't always bring up the tombstone because it kind of imagery that like freaks some people out, but we actually use it in some of our corporate programs because
that's great.
It's evocative, right? It's very immediately clarifying.
It is. No, the image connects to the action of thinking of it. No, most definitely.
I love that you went there. Well, thank you again so much for your work and for being so real and transparent and open in sharing it with us. Really glad to have this wisdom, both practical and aspirational, out in our community of people first and purpose-driven leaders. So thank you. Keep it up, and we'll keep in touch.
We're energized about this journey and hope you choose to join us. Click the subscribe button now so you don't miss out on all the actionable wisdom to come.